welcome to our first episode of Grit in the Wild. I am one of your hosts, Melissa Short.
And I'm Adam Short, and we're super excited to have you join us in our kickoff of our podcast. This has been a long process of where we have conversed, we have navigated our own stories, and especially over the past 12 to 14 months, really have felt the need to go public about a lot of our story and how we've navigated our past 12 plus years, 14 years even, leaving church. And so we hope to cover a lot of different subjects around spiritual abuse, high control groups, religious trauma, and really delve into our personal stories and life lessons that we've learned along the way. We're still very much learning. So, what we hope to accomplish is really to create a safe space to confront pain, but also have a space where we can look towards resilience and hope.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up a lot of different topics we want to cover. And yeah, we're excited about this and a little nervous too.
Yep, a little
Yeah.
nervous, but that's okay. We're just hoping to come be ourselves, and we want you to join us, and we'd love to have the interaction and the participation. We hope to bring on other survivors, other advocates in the space of spiritual abuse, CSA, and all kinds of other abuse that happens in church environments, religious environments, and just really high control environments in general.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about who we are or what we're planning to do. So we thought it would be helpful to kind of kick off just to share a little bit more about who we are and our journey, how we got here, and why we're doing this. So we wanted to just set the stage for that here in this first episode. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So
Tell us about yourself, and then
um
I can follow.
probably should tell everyone like we're a married couple.
Yep, that's
So
important.
we've been married for 13, almost 14 years. We have one son who is 7, and we reside in the Carolinas. We love it here. I'm originally from California, born and raised. We met out there at a ministry school we were a part of, got married, did a little stint in Texas, and then made our way out here where you were from.
Yeah,
And so I am a trauma recovery coach. So I work in mental health. I consider myself a mental health professional and help women heal from trauma and work with their overwhelming emotions and help them build self-connection and make their way through that and build resilience and hope too. So
awesome. And so, like Melissa said, I am from the Carolinas, but I've lived all over the world, several states. We met in California at Bethel, and we were both Bethel students at the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. But I am from the Carolinas originally, and I've lived in Texas, Missouri, and France and Africa. So, just kind of who I am by profession, I'm an accountant, but honestly, very much enjoy stuff like this, helping advocate for survivors and really peeling back the layers of what it means to deconstruct and still find faith in the middle of that. I find that very interesting and very deep meaning with that, just as I navigate that in my personal life. So I've been in several high control organizations slash I guess churches over the years, not just churches, but other organizations too that were cult like and high control. So a lot of lessons, a lot of things that I've learned along the way that have been very difficult. And in the process, I call myself a survivor of spiritual abuse. So I'm looking forward to talking about my story, but also kind of nervous and scared at the same time because I've never really talked about it publicly, except in little bitty snippets here and there on Twitter and privately. So that's a little bit about myself. So yeah, we've definitely we've had, I think we can say we've had our experience with high cult or high control slash cultish
yeah, I would say we've had
organizations
our share of trauma from church and our experiences.
for
And
sure.
um, yeah, I think like kind of what landed us here, like there's a lot of backstory that I'm sure we'll unpack in
Yeah,
more episodes. It's a lot to unpack in right one episode, but
for sure.
um yeah, like some of our experiences specifically about 13 years ago when we left Reading and moved to Texas. That season of our life lasted about 4 years, and the result of coming out of that environment and community is that we really developed kind of a complex post traumatic stress syndrome, which sounds really dramatic, but it's actually very common for survivors of spiritual abuse or religious trauma. to actually develop a kind of a post-traumatic stress. And I don't think either of us realized that what was going on.
Yeah.
We were one way and then we were another way after that season of life, and we
Yeah.
isolated. Like, we have lived the past 13 years. That's really changed in the last year or so. We
Yeah.
really started to kind of come out of that isolation.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, we didn't realize, like, isolation is like one of the hallmarks of post-traumatic stress, and we were living in that. And
Yeah.
just
100%.
our trust in people, our trust in the church as an institution and leadership was just completely really shipwrecked and destroyed through those experiences. And so
Yeah.
it's been a
Absolutely.
lot of, like, right, therapy,
Yeah.
counseling, healing,
The works.
hours of us doing this, like,
Yeah.
at night when our son goes to bed, just trying to make sense of why, like, what happened,
Yeah.
and, like,
So true.
processing all the things that went wrong. And how did we go from being these people that we were the people that were like, we were in church all the time, like, our whole life was ministry. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was the one that was like every Sunday, prayer meetings, church, youth group, women's group, like all of the things, for many years. And then to go from that to like not even in church, like, it's such a stark,
Even now.
yeah, it's such a stark contrast, and was so disorienting and disillusioning for us. And so, like, we're hungry and really want to share
Yeah.
what we've come through.
For sure.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there,
There's
but
you hit on so many amazing parts of this. And I'll just say this, and we've talked about this so many times, countless times, back in our living room, in the evenings, we have literally spent, and I'm sure so many of y'all have too, whether it's with your friends or your spouse or whoever it is, trying to unpack what in the actual blank has happened. Like, it's and there's so many layers to this. It's spiritual. I've talked about this with John Collins, who's like one of my new heroes. Highly recommend, by the way, his podcast, William Branham Historical Research. But I've talked to him, have conversations with him about, this isn't just spiritual. This is financial, right? This is relational. This is professional, because this kind of stuff, in our experience, and as we've watched other people's stories unfold, it has affected their professional careers or stunted their careers. It affects your relationships, it affects your family, your marriage. There really isn't an area that's off the table
yeah.
when it comes to these things. And I think probably one of the biggest reasons for that, at least in the organizations we've been a part of, not to say this doesn't happen in reformed camps or whatever, fill in the blank, whatever group you want to call it. Our experience has primarily been in what I like to call the trifecta of the hypercharismatic movement, which for me, I was in the trifecta, man. I was in Morningstar early on. We'll get into more of that later. IHOP KC and Metro Christian Fellowship, sort of the umbrella organizations there, and then Bethel. And so in the
And then
charismatic,
another call after that.
and another call after that, which was not a church, but there was overlap to a lot of
Yeah.
the common themes. And it's not even just themes, it's like the effects, right? It's the stuff that happens, that hits, and it's layers and layers and layers. And so I'm getting to a point. My point is, in the hypercharismatic world, we deeply embed and embrace these principles of living, right? These, miracles, signs, wonders, encounters, dreams, visions. I could go on and on, of honestly a very dynamic expression of Christianity that's very exciting. Okay. And that stuff on the outside looks very, it's very full of fanfare and expression and all that stuff. But under that, there's profound tradition, which is ironic, right? It's so ironic because people kind of accuse charismatics of not having a tradition. You just kind of like wing it and you just sort of do what you want. But my point is, this stuff really runs deep. And I don't know what I was leading to with that whole spiel there. But anyway, the point being, like, having multiple rounds of experience in these kinds of organizations, you learn a thing or two. But then you also, I think this is what my point was. We feel like this podcast is just an extension of conversations you and I
Yeah.
have had privately for years,
Yeah.
for over a decade. So we're excited. We want to invite y'all in. We want to invite more people into our process. I've been pretty active on Twitter here over the past, what, 10 months since the IOPKC scandal hit the fan with Mike Bickle. And little by little, I've gotten more and more courage to speak out and try and do my little bitty part, my little bitty voice to try to help survivors, and then team up with other advocates and stuff like that, because there are a lot of other amazing people out there right now that are trying to fight for empathy and healing, and really to give people the opportunity to tell their story in a safe way, and honestly to get professional help. And I'm the first to admit I have a therapist, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, we're like
To
clearly like I work in mental health, emotional health. Like we're big mental health advocates. Like believe that's absolutely necessary, especially healing from any kind of traumatic experience, spiritual abuse, CSA, any of that. It's really important to kind of explore that. Again, probably systemically in a lot of our charismatic circles, that's very frowned
frowned
upon. And
upon.
so we actually don't get the help. Like
Yeah.
I know, just a side note, like we did lots of different kinds of inner healing and Christian
Yes.
counseling, but it did not address the trauma. It was when I stepped outside of those circles to go to a licensed professional counselor
Yeah.
that I really understood what was going on with me, why I was stuck and why I wasn't able to re-engage with life. And my healing was again the trauma treatment and the trauma processing and
Yeah.
helping me really get unstuck and
For
really
sure.
make sense, right, of what was really happening in my body and my brain with my emotions and everything through all of these experiences. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we can definitely unpack that in another
Yeah,
episode.
we got to hit that, get into that. Cause, and then I'll just say too, for me, like full disclosure, I'm in a process where, and I've been working through a lot of this stuff for many years. We've had different journeys. I think in some ways you've been ahead of me in and we've talked about this. Like there's been various iterations. I
Right,
even
yeah.
think back to like 2015 when you were meeting with a counselor at that time with a different, very different approach than what you have
Yeah.
now, of course. But they all have served their purpose.
Right, yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting at is we both have had our journeys, and then I'm finding incredible healing right now with my therapist in the realm of what's called EMDR, and you'll have to remind me what that stands for.
Eye movement
Movement desensitization.
reprocessing. Yeah, sorry.
I decided I
Yeah.
was gonna call it Emder in my southern accent. That's easier for me to say. So anyway, but that's to your point, like the modalities that are out there, in the hypercharismatic movements. And I'm not gonna knock all of that inner healing because I actually did benefit, but I know a
Yeah,
lot of people have
absolutely.
had
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really horrific experiences with things like Sozo, Theophostic. What are some others? I mean, just even like demon, people going in and saying, "Hey, we're going to cast all these demons out of you." People have had really traumatic experiences going through that stuff, like more of the Christian
Well, and I can yeah.
it's does it have a place? I guess it can, but I think what I've observed is there are more people who have been harmed by those approaches than they have been helped.
And I can tell you why that is because trauma is different. Trauma is an experience in the body and the brain, and there's a way to deal with trauma. And a lot of those approaches, while they can be really helpful for spiritual things and
Yeah.
different things, I've experienced that too. They've been helpful to me in different seasons, but they don't address trauma. And they can actually be re traumatizing because there's a way to work with it based on research and science. And so I think that's important to say too. Like, we're not knocking that those things can't be helpful, they can't bring
Yeah.
healing, and God can't use those, but there's a different approach with trauma, and those actually can be very re-traumatizing for people because the people who are using them aren't trained in how to work with trauma. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important. But
So that's kind of that might be more of a kind of a
yeah,
rabbit trail we kind of went off there, but it's very important and very pertinent for our story. It's very
yeah.
much still a part of our story right now, both of our individual stories and together as a couple. But
We talk about this all the time. We kind of started deconstructing about 13 years ago. We
yeah,
we didn't even there wasn't a name
there
for
wasn't a
it. We were
name.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, what happened? We don't, we feel terrified going to church." And we actually didn't like really consciously just say we don't want to go to church. It was more like the season we were in, there wasn't anywhere to go. We lived in this tiny town where everybody knew everybody, and
Before we moved back to the Carolinas,
yeah,
it
and
was
all the
not here.
churches were very toxic where we lived, and it was
Yeah.
not they none of them were a safe environment, and we're very infiltrated with a lot of the community. It's very complex and diluted. But
Yes.
that's what like what initially led us to not going to church is we just by default there wasn't a safe place for us. And we kind of started this journey of deconstructing and really like examining, well, like our faith has still remained
Yeah.
despite not going to church. And so that led to a journey too of like examining, well, what is church and all of that. But
Yeah.
we laugh now, like a few years ago, I think, right, like during the pandemic, like the big like deconstruction became very like mainstream. And we were like, oh, that's
That's
what
what
you
this
call it?
is.
Oh my gosh. Like
Yeah.
we've been doing this for years and had no idea. So
Yeah.
we feel like we've been in this for quite a while
Quite a long
now.
time. But
Yeah.
I will say this, like, yes, we've been in it for a long time, but let me just add this layer, which is a massive layer. And actually this layer has multiple, many, many layers within it. And it is this. It's the wave after wave after wave of scandal that has hit the body of Christ over the past, and this isn't anything new, but it feels like since October of 2023, when the Mike Bickle IHOP KC stuff hit the fan, there have been it's like continuous scandals, one after
Yeah.
another. And so for me, I I feel like I actually got hit by a ton of bricks just about daily, just as this stuff is unfolding, primarily around IHOP KC because I have history there. So it's very personal, but I guess what I'm getting at is yes, we were in the deconstruction. We've been in deconstruction for a long time, but for me personally, I'll just speak for myself. I have hit a whole other sort of depth, I
Yeah.
feel like, in my process because my deconstruction now is hitting specific areas of belief, things that I have been, deeply programmed to believe over many years of being in charismatic circles that I still find myself believing that I'm like, I don't know that I believe that anymore. I don't know if I believe this anymore. I'm not sure what I think about this. And so it's like, it's really literally like we've talked about this as well. I'm of the opinion, put it all on the chopping block because the fact of the matter is the gospel is unshakable. The true gospel is unshakable. So anything that is a false construct that's not grounded in truth, it's gonna eventually fall apart anyway. So we might as well just, get it out of the way and let her rip. That's kind of my thinking. Now, I will say it's not it's not an easy process to go through that either though, because when you start asking those kind of questions, you're like, oh wow, I believed, for example, that the sick get healed. And I still believe that. I still believe in miracles and signs and wonders, but I've also been made aware of the fact that in a lot of the movements that gave birth to the churches that we were a part of, like Bethel, IHOP, and Morningstar, they have their roots in a movement called Latter Rain, which had incredible malfeasance and fraud and fakery. So you have to really pull this stuff apart and peel it back. So I just wanted to make that point because yes, we've been in the deconstruction since 2011, but yet it has gone to a whole nother level over the past year.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree with you. And when I say that, I also very much want to say like I feel like we have like there's things that we're sure of, but there's things we're like very much like right
Like
tons that we're
flux.
like I'm more confused and unsure than I've ever been about other things.
Yeah.
Like you said, as each story comes out or we learn another piece of information about the roots of these beliefs and teachings, we're like, oh my gosh. So yeah,
The
it's like
roots,
more and
yes.
more we're still processing and we're still asking God, what the heck? Like,
Mhm, and
and
asking people too.
yeah, and our process has been so different too. Like, and I just want to say too, like, we all process this differently. Like, I just really want to speak to like the black and white. Like, we can tend to go like black and white in the church, like it needs to be all or nothing, right? It's all good or all bad. And I think for me on this journey is learning there's a lot of gray area and there's a lot of nuance and it's very personal for each person. So I just want to say too, if you're listening and you're deconstructing and you're processing, like your process doesn't have to look like ours. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to look like anybody else's. It's probably going to be really unique and to like give yourself permission to like have your place
that's a good
there.
point.
And like ours has been really different. Like there's been things that have been really similar.
Yeah,
We've been going at things at different
for
paces.
sure.
Like he's more like, right, like you mentioned, kind of wanting to put it all on the chopping block. As for me, like for me, it's been really helpful to go like, you know what? I know this piece was like a God piece that I can hold on to.
Yeah,
Like, like
makes sense.
I have like these nuggets where like I'm pretty sure about this and I don't need to deconstruct that. And I think it's okay to find good even in like you don't have to like anything we say, we're not telling you what to
Yeah,
believe,
it's not prescriptive.
but like it's okay to be like, you know what, these pieces really resonated with me.
Hmm.
These I'm not sure about, and these I'm like, oh hell no, that is not at all what it is. So
Yep.
I think just normalizing, right, the spectrum that
Yeah.
like it's different for everybody.
That kind of stuff's going to happen. And I mean, I'll make an example here or give an example. One person might have had a really bad experience in a healing service at church where maybe the person on the stage with the microphone was emphasizing, or, I should say, like insisting that a person was healed. And maybe you're the person they were praying for, and you're like, I don't want to have anything to do with a pastor or a leader or anybody praying over a microphone for me to be healed. Like that could be a triggering experience. And so, there are lots of things about church that trigger me.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but it's like, do I still believe in God? Yeah. Do I still believe in Jesus? Yeah. But do I like hearing a preacher scream over a microphone? God, no. I can't stand it. It triggers me. So, anyway, that's just kind of an example there
Yeah.
of just kind of how you can be different in your process.
Yeah, and I think we kinda got a little bit off track on our little
Yeah. We went down
but,
some
like,
rabbit
we
trails.
just wanted to mention too, like, yeah, that we still believe. We still, have held on to our faith through this process. We still believe in Jesus, like, we still follow him, but we're very much unsure about a lot of things that we were taught, a lot of, like, what the church has become and is, like,
Yes.
it's not recognizable to us. It's not something that we're, like, interested in trying to get back to. We're more like, okay, like from our perspective and our process, we're like, this looks and feels so far from anything you intended for it to be, God. So, like, now what? Like, so we're kind of like, this is our attempt to say, okay, like, we're trying to find our way. And
Mhm.
this podcast is a step to finding that way, like
Yeah.
finding what does church or even taking that word
Yeah,
off,
not
like
even
just
church, really.
community, fellowship, like what does it look like to live as believers without it looking like what we're seeing, what we've seen?
Yes.
Like we're on a journey of like, what can that be?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so that part of it is exciting for me. I think about that. I just there's so many of y'all that I've met on Twitter and or reconnected with after so many years, and that's just been amazing, like, finding community around
yeah.
healing, healing, but getting mad and getting angry and
Yes.
being disgusted and just
Yeah.
so, um I don't even know what to call there's not a word in my vocabulary that can encapsulate all of it.
Mm.
But like finding a connection, like real connection around this is like, wow, maybe we're getting back to something that has a thread of authenticity to it.
Yeah.
And I've missed that.
Yeah.
I've missed that for so long. Like I do not miss church at all. I do miss the connection with people. I will say I do miss work. I do
Yeah.
miss Bethel worship. I'm going to say it like I do. And a lot of people, hate Bethel worship, and I get it. Like it's a money making machine. They're pulling in to the tune of collectively, globally, about $80 million is the last one I saw per year. And it really is. It's a massive money making machine. But full disclosure, like we've talked about this, I like turning on Bethel worship, and I I feel God's presence. Now, somebody might have a different opinion of like, well, that's not God's presence. You're just jacking up your emotions and
We could do
feeling.
a whole episode on that.
Yeah, which hey, you know what? Maybe I am just jacking up my emotions, but it feels dang good to play awesome music, and I don't know. So that's kind of the mystery. One of the things that's sort of the mystery box for me. But but
Yeah.
yeah. So did we cover like who
I'm
we
trying to
are,
think.
or
Yeah,
did we
like
leave anything out? Or
yeah, I think we kinda, yeah, I think we did. I think we
okay,
kinda did. Yeah, like, I think you kinda
yeah,
tying into this, like, we really yeah, like, we really want this space and this podcast and the people that we might connect with, you
yeah,
or any of you that are listening, we wanna make connections with you, like,
for
leave
sure.
us comments. We have an email that we'll put up that you can
Yep.
email us, tell us your story, like, we wanna have people on, different professionals, different survivors, and hear your story. It's
Yes.
when we tell our stories, we can heal, and telling your story is very personal. I think there sometimes has to be a little bit of a level of healing where you feel ready and courageous and not that you're not courageous if you don't, but ready and want to. But it can
Yes.
be a very healing experience to share our stories because for so many of us that have had right these traumas, we've been silenced. I know for us silence has been a huge part of our traumatic
Yeah.
experience. We were, and even still, like, we have kept so much inside and haven't
Yes.
shared because of fear, right? Right, all the things we're told, like, in church, it's just nasty, all, like, the
Retaliation.
dismissiveness, like, if you share that you're upset or that you're angry, you're unforgiving, you're bitter, you're
Disgruntled, or
yeah, you
yeah,
have offense, and that's just a load of crap, I'm sorry, like,
it is.
I don't yeah, we can talk about that,
Yeah.
but, like, you will not get that here, like, you it is healing and good to be honest and own your feelings about what you've been through, and that actually helps you move through. And, forgiveness is a process. I mean, right? 70 times 7. I'm forgiven, and I'm still going to forgive. Like, it takes time. There's layers, and I get angry, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, gotta forget, so we know what it feels like to not experience empathy, to share something with somebody and get that deer in the
Deer in the
headlights look like,
headlights. Yeah.
"Oh, church hurt, you got your feelings hurt,"
Yeah.
and the whole, "Oh, there's no perfect church and we're
Yeah.
all sinners." I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
not all of us are abusing children and
Right.
doing all of these things." Like, there's a big difference here, and so I just wanna say, like, your anger's valid, your disgust is valid, and it's real, and your
Yep.
sadness, your grief over what you've lost, maybe we
Yes. Oh
I'm kinda
man,
going on a tangent, but
that's a whole nother thing there. Yeah.
yeah,
What you
like,
lose.
we've lost so much, we have grieved so much. I never imagined how much grief I would have to go through to get to this place,
Yeah.
and so if that's you, like, we get that part, and we want you to know, like,
You're not
you're
alone.
not alone.
Yeah.
We've felt alone for
Yes.
so many years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Loneliness, man. But we've had each other, which has been
Yes.
awesome. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people, some people go through this without a spouse or without a partner or
Yeah.
a close friend, and that, I mean, like, that's that's a whole nother level of loneliness,
Mhm.
type of thing. But yeah. So yeah, I guess the bottom line is, like, our goal, we want this to be a safe space. We want
Yeah.
this to be a dialogue. We really are. I'm super excited about bringing people on. I want to, like, hear people's stories. um, I want to hear from experts,
Yeah.
people that have expertise in these areas. But then this is meant to be like a safe space where people can feel what they're feeling,
Yeah.
and it's okay. And also, the other thing that I'll mention is, we've talked about this. Like, this is meant to be raw, authentic,
Yeah.
not sugar coated.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna do our very best to be as real as possible. And I mean, we're still working out whether we want to name names in our stories. Like, that's a real consideration, and
Yeah.
we don't know yet. We'll see. So, but anyway, so that's a little bit about us, or probably a lot about us, probably more than we plan to say about
Yeah.
who we are. But hopefully that kind of helps, set the stage for where we plan on going
Yeah.
with this.
Which is a lot of different places.
Apparently so. Apparently we're on track to hit a bunch of stuff. But so yeah, should we hit some of the, like, what
Yeah,
where we
like, so where
plan?
are we going?
Where
Yeah.
are we going?
Many different places, but yeah, we
Yeah.
want to share some of the topics, like, clearly like sharing our story, unpacking parts of our story, which we kind of did some of that in this podcast or in this episode. But
Just a little snippet. Yeah.
yeah, things that we've learned and are unlearning. And then yeah, do you want to share the like different topics or whatever that we've talked
Yeah.
about kind of covering?
Yeah, for sure. So, and there probably are more that we're
Yeah.
forgetting here, but we just kind of bulleted out some key, like big picture areas of these are areas that we feel have been very meaningful for us to sort of not only explore, but talk through with our therapist, talk through amongst ourselves, between us, and then talk through with other people. And these are things that we are not experts in. I'll just say that up front, like not an expert at all. I'm not a professional at all in these areas, but
Well, I am
well,
in some
you
of
are.
them.
I'm just saying for me, I'm not. I'm not. If I have a question about trauma, I just go ask her. But like, so trauma, right? So trauma is probably top of the list. I know that's one of your most your biggest things.
Yeah.
So let me just go through. So trauma, CSA, financial exploitation slash financial systems, and that is an
That
area that
is your
I am
area.
an
Yeah.
expert in. I'm an accountant,
Yeah.
financial advisor, licensed, by the way, not unlicensed like some of these people that try to do this stuff. But yeah, to talk about the financial structures, the financial exploitation, particularly it shows up in these high control environments, right? And so inevitably you're going to find a lot of money involved that typically flows up the pyramid. So I am very excited about talking about that. And that sort of dovetails to the prosperity gospel and even like the seven mountains,
Oh, yeah.
because that it's this whole teaching finds its roots in some very dark stuff that I've recently became aware of, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. So another one is spiritual abuse, cult indicators and how to spot those, how to avoid those.
Can I say something about that really
Yeah,
quick? Like,
yeah,
yeah, just and we'll probably yeah, we'll get into this more, but like I think we hear the word cult, we don't realize how subtle these things are, spiritual abuse and cult. We're like, "Oh, that's really extreme," but it is
yeah. That's like
very
Waco,
much weaved.
David Koresh, or whatever.
Yeah, it's not. It's very much weaved into these mainstream systems. So we really want to talk about that and
Yeah,
define kind of what those are. But yeah, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
All the indicators, how to spot those, how to avoid like why did we find ourselves in I
Yeah.
mean, for me, 4, I've been in 4 of them.
Yeah.
I've been in 4 freaking cult groups, man.
Cult hopping, right?
Yeah,
You
cult
just
hopping.
go from one to another. And it's I think we've identified I know I had to come to the place where it was like, at some point, you have to take a look at yourself, not to blame and say, "Oh, it's all my fault," but,
Right.
like, what in me is being drawn to these types of environments? And that was a big part of, like, my process was, like, uncovering um, some of those reasons why I was attracted and drawn to these environments. So that's
Yep.
really important. Otherwise, we rinse and repeat, and we've experienced that, right? You just rinse and repeat. Oh, it's those people, it's that place, and you go to the
Yep.
next place, and you're like, oh, it's those people, it's that place, and you're like, wait a minute, like there's something not right here. So I think that's really important to explore.
Very important. So important.
Yeah,
Narcissistic abuse slash narcissism. Definitely want to hit that, unpack that. You know, where you have cult of personality. Again, this ties back to cult stuff, right? Where you have oftentimes in these organizations, you have one or a couple or a few very, very charismatic, influential, winsome orators and leaders who, gather people around their mission or their vision or whatever it is. And inevitably the organization that's built up around that person or that small group of people is highly narcissistic because of that. And so and there's just a whole lot that we want to talk about there. Historical roots of where these cult groups got their start, and I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but like the ones that I've been a part of, and you've been a part of a couple of those too, like Morningstar, IHOP KC / Metro Christian Fellowship, Kansas City Fellowship, Kansas City Vineyard, and then Bethel. Those 3 groups, really, those are 3 sort of groups or ecosystems that have historical roots in some real dark stuff and some real dark practices. And so we need to talk about it. It's
yeah,
like where because nobody ever told me that story. I just happened to show up in the late '90s, and here I am in the middle of a movement that had long predated anything that I ever saw in my lifetime. So that's so important.
Yeah.
And then with that, heretical teachings,
Yeah.
damaging
Oof.
teachings slash false teachings,
Yeah.
and we've been really stunned to crack the Bible open and see how often in the New Testament, we're warned about false teachers, false
Yeah.
teachings, and like they have some pretty strong language. I mean, all y'all preachers that are out there saying we need to stop talking about the
Oh,
preachers that are falling, dude, have you read the New Testament? Like I'm like I still can't believe how much sharp language is in the New
yeah.
Testament about calling out, like,
Oh,
put them
yeah.
out from among you.
Yeah, like, it's pretty graceless, like, honestly, but
Yeah,
yeah, and again, we have so much to explore with that, but,
yeah,
like, it makes sense, like, if church is gonna be a safe place and a safe place for the vulnerable and, you know, vulnerable people, women, children, like, you have
and
to
men
protect. And
too.
men, yes, I'm
Men,
sorry,
yeah,
yes, all people, for
yeah, but
people,
but you're right, mainly women and mainly children
yeah,
is the
but
vast
yes.
majority.
All people, like, to be a safe place, you do need to call that out. So, yeah, I think that's a huge one that we have really missed in our at least we'll speak for our, like, charismatic, what we were taught, like, this whole restoration, like, get them back
Yeah,
into the
give me a
I'm
break.
like, "No, no, 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 no."
It's garbage,
Yeah,
total
anyways.
garbage. So, yeah, false teachings. And then, but then, like, flip side, sort of other side of the coin is we really want to also focus on hope for the future and
Yes.
resilience because that is one thing. Those are two things, and not what we don't mean by that is bypassing, right?
No.
We don't mean, oh yeah, just sort of ignore and override and just bypass yourself, gaslight yourself into healing, right? That makes zero sense at all. Like,
Or toxic positivity,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh, if
yeah,
you just think more
yeah.
positively," or just right? Like, the whole, "Just renew your mind on these things and you won't," that's not what we're saying, but, like, real hope and real resilience comes from experiencing the fullness of your emotions and your experience and being able to move through it. That's what makes us resilient is actually, like, fully coming through it, not this yeah, like you said, this false
Grit your
hope where you
teeth.
have to, like, pretend you're hopeful when you're actually, like, not.
That's actually the kind of grit that we're not talking about in our podcast
Yes.
title. Grit in the Wild has nothing to do with like, white knuckling it or gritting your teeth. What we're talking about, our title of our podcast, there's a lot in there. Maybe we can talk about that more at
Yeah.
some point, but like the grit that we have discovered in this journey is very much along the lines of this resilience that you're kind of talking about here.
Yeah, and
It's like you and it's funny, like you run across people in their 70s and 80s and they just shoot straight with you. They just they're just super honest because they've lived so long, they've learned a few things. And anyway, I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but
can I say something about
yeah,
that? Like, just from my background, like, I just wanna define what resilience is. A lot of
yeah,
people think resilience is pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and being mentally strong. That is not resilience. Resilience is having the capacity to handle adversity. So that means you're actually able to sit in the adversity. You're actually able to move through and be in your pain and coming through that. That's what real resilience is.
it's
It's
good.
building capacity for the hard and the good. It's not this, yeah, "Oh, I gotta be strong." That's not resiliency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
So yeah, we capacity to be able to
Capacity.
carry the fullness of real life, real humans.
Yeah.
We're not like these spiritual robots.
Yeah, the cults wanted us to be, the robot that comes in like, "Let me open my mind and you fill me with everything I'm supposed to think, and I'll be the robot that you program me to be."
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're deprogramming from. Like we're trying to get back to being a human, you know?
Yeah, it was so funny. I was telling, I forget who it was, someone I was talking to, another survivor that I had made a connection with. And I told her, I said, for so many years in church, I was taught how spiritual to be. And for the last few years, I'm learning how to be human now. like,
Yeah.
like it's both, but I was taught to be so spiritual in our like charismatic circles, like so super spiritual and
Superhuman.
supernatural
It's
and
almost like superhuman. It
but
really is.
yeah, but then I was like, "Oh, I don't get to be a human, so you're not actually allowing being human." And now I find so much peace and like freedom in my humanity.
I love it.
The fullness of my humanity. Like that has brought me like
It's good.
yeah,
That's some good stuff right there.
yeah.
There's a lot in there. So
Okay.
yeah, and then the last three sort of topics that we may or may not, or probably will hit,
Yeah.
aren't necessarily directly related to the primary focus, but they're very much a part of who we are. So one of those is entrepreneurship. So we're both business owners.
Yeah.
You own your business, I have my business. And so that has very much shaped our sort of outlook on life and, our experience and why we believe what we believe, sort of living against the grain, as it were. Um, so yeah, entrepreneurship slash business, we both are very passionate about
Yeah.
that, have a lot to say about that. And then this is kind of a catch-all. So marriage slash relationships, friendships, and parenting. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all connected. And then the last but not least is travel.
We just
So
threw that in there. Yeah,
we like
again,
to
these are
try,
just this is just who we those are the
yeah,
things that those are just us. Those are our kind of unique
things that
things.
we,
Yeah,
yeah, things that we value. So
that we might just touch on for fun, right? Because this doesn't have to all be
it doesn't
super
have to all be, yeah,
serious. It can
we
be
can,
like, hey, this like we just want you to know who we are too and like we're people.
yeah,
Yeah, we're humans. We are like just normal,
very normal,
very
very
normal
boring,
people.
boring
Yes.
people.
We're not trying to be we're not trying to be influencers or we're not trying to make money off a podcast. We're not
Yeah,
trying to make this a business. This is purely just part of our healing process and
for sure.
hoping that it might encourage some of you.
Yeah, I mean, even if
Yeah.
one person watches this, that's fine.
Yeah.
We both have our businesses. We don't need. I trust me. I don't want another business. I've got my hands full with one, and you probably don't
Yeah.
want another
Yeah.
business either. And I sure don't want to go, sign up for another job because I'm probably anyway. I won't get on that. But yeah. So should we hit? So we have
Yeah.
we have a few things that we wanted to kind of express as far as what we hope happens, what we hope to happen here in our podcast,
Yeah.
in this, if you want to call it platform. So you want to
Yeah,
kick
I
us
mean,
off?
number 1, like, we really want those of you who are maybe resonate with what we're sharing or on this journey recovering from spiritual abuse or trauma, religious trauma, all that stuff, to know that you're not alone because we know how lonely this journey can be, like, wondering where are the people who understand.
Yeah.
And so we really hope that you, yeah, find a sense of, like, commonality or connection,
Hmm.
um, just knowing you're not by yourself, like, you're not the only one out there
Yeah.
dealing with these things. There are actually millions, I think, of us that are in this place, so yeah, I think that's a big hope.
Yep. For sure. And then we really would just want to, our goal is like, if we can help bring just even an increment of healing
Yeah,
to anybody, to
yeah,
one person even, like, to us, that's so fulfilling. Just getting a little bit of feedback from a few people along the way over this past year has been amazing. Like,
yeah,
just to know that you shared like one little iota of your story and it helped a person like come to the conclusion that something they're a part of is unhealthy and that they can, be healed, like, and feel more evolved and whole
yeah.
afterwards.
I think too, just like that there can be yeah, like, there can be life after this. There can be good life, and there can be yeah, yeah, hope. I mean, there can be hope after spiritual abuse and trauma.
Yeah.
In every area of your life, like even in your faith, like I know that can feel really messy. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, there's a way to navigate, and come through some of this and find life again, in
Hmm.
a different way, in a healthier way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we want you to feel heard and listened to. Again, we kind of touched on that earlier, just like
Yeah.
raw, open, like you're not going to be dismissed. Like we believe you. If you come and tell us something was horrible and you were hurt, we
Hmm.
believe you. Like we get that. We know
Yeah.
what it's like to feel not believed.
Right.
Yeah, and then just yeah, we're not here like we really wanna make it clear that we're not like ministry leaders here. We're not like trying to be a church or like we don't have all the answers. You should question things we say. Like I hope you do. Like don't, take our word for it. Like process, like discern, like
Hmm.
do your own homework. I mean, take what you want, throw away the rest. Like
Yeah.
feel free to make your own
Conclusion.
conclusions about this. This is just us. So we're not saying this is the only way to do this or this is the right way to think. Like, we really want to encourage critical thinking and coming to your own conclusions. Pray about it. Go to your Bible. Do whatever you do to
Yeah.
process. We are not the answer holders. We are flawed humans who are navigating our faith and
Right.
our journey and our process
Yeah.
and our healing, trying to make our way too. So we're just normal. We're not like special or super
Yeah, for sure.
spiritual or anything like that. We're just like you, another person. You understand
Yeah.
anything about that? I mean,
No, I think you covered it.
um,
Yeah. And then if you do disagree, please do tell us. Like, leave a comment. Like, I think something different about this. Please
yeah.
do. Like, I think that's healthy. Please don't be nasty.
Yeah, please no
I've
death
had some
threats
people
and
be nasty on Twitter, and that's fine. I've tried to like suck it up and be like, all right, man, be the bigger person here. That's all right. Disagree though. I mean, if you have a different idea, I I, I want to hear. Like, I'm all about. I'm so excited to hear other perspectives and different experiences.
yeah,
So we welcome your opinion. If you have a different opinion or experience, please share it.
yeah.
And again,
Um,
you already covered the. We don't have all the answers. We're not. We are not spiritual leaders. That ship sailed.
yeah.
I think that ship long gone. But yeah, so that's our hope. That's what we're hoping for here. We really just want this to be an open dialogue. And so yeah, hit us up, comment.
And then what's the email if they want to
Yeah,
email?
yeah, it's gritinthewild@gmail.com. So
There you go. Yeah.
GRITINTHEWILD@gmail.com.
Yeah, and we will do our best. Again, might not be perfect with that depending on the volume of or how many messages and stuff, but we will do our best to respond to you, whether it be comments on YouTube or
YouTube.
the
Yeah.
email. We really want to um, you know, it's our commitment to try one of us to try to respond as much as we can. We
Yeah.
will do that.
Yes.
Because we're doing this to build connection and help you get connected to resources too. And that was kind of the
For
next
sure.
thing that we wanted to mention, like
Yeah.
just a list of, right, like different resources and people. I thought of one more person to add on here too, but
Okay. We can add them.
that we have found helpful during our process. Do you want to name
Yeah,
some?
so and this is a list that we literally put this together in just a few minutes. So there are probably others that we haven't thought of that will add to this or that, that's on our list somewhere. But these are people that we've benefited from. These are thought leaders and experts and also these are people that have created space. Some of these are advocates, authors. So I'm just going to go through. I'll hit a few. You can hit a few. So John Collins, he is the founder of William Branham Historical Research Podcast. Highly recommend his entire channel material. He's got books. One just came out recently. Diane Langberg. She is refresh
She's
my
a
memory.
therapist, and she specializes in like spiritual abuse and trauma. So she's very seasoned and has a lot of she has a couple books. I can't remember the titles, but really good information on spiritual abuse and coming from a professional, like a counselor.
Okay.
And she's a believer. So I mean that can be helpful or not helpful to you depending on where you're at. KJ Ramsey, she is amazing. She is a trauma therapist, an author, and spiritual abuse survivor and advocate.
Hmm.
Her book, The Lord is My Courage, is one of my favorites. If you're looking for a book to just, again, help you process through spiritual abuse, her stuff. And it has kind of a mental health like element because she's a therapist. So
Cool.
love that one.
Next one is Heaven Bent, and which is created by Tara Jean Stevens. And this is an incredible series. It's a podcast. You can find it anywhere. And this goes through a number of organizations, the series or the season I've listened to is the one about IOPKC. So highly recommend it. If you had any involvement with IOPKC, you're trying to figure that out. She really goes down the rabbit hole and she interviews people. There are stories of survivors in there. So, and there's just a lot there. And incidentally, she was covering the IHOP KC. She had started her season about IHOP KC before the scandal became public. I think I'm getting this timing right. And then literally the scandal hit the fan back in the fall of 2023, and she was covering it in real time. So it was like literally a real time kind of episode rollout. So Tara Jean Stevens / Heaven Bent. Next is Boz Chavidian. He's an attorney along with his organization that he founded, which is Grace, and it specializes in helping survivors of abuse um, find their healing, and he helps represent those survivors in a court of law.
Yeah.
He represents as an attorney, so he's trauma informed. So highly recommended if you're a survivor and you need legal representation. He does an excellent job.
Yeah, and then Dr. Ramani, I can't remember her last name, but she has a book called It's Not You, and she's the probably leading expert on narcissism. It's really, really important, her work, I think, especially as it relates to spiritual abuse.
Mhm.
I think that spiritual abuse and narcissism are married together
Yeah.
in a lot of these systems and places. So it's really important to understand the characteristics of narcissism. I know we talked about that earlier, but there's different types of narcissism. So it's
Mm.
not all right, the big personality. There's covert, there's different characteristics of different types, and it's important to understand that.
Yes.
And then Blaze and Christina Foray, they have Wake Up and Win podcasts. They have been on the forefront of really advocating for CSA and spiritual abuse victims and talking about a lot of this stuff. They have really
Yes.
like
They've been at the
helped
top.
us so much. Like we've listened to a lot of their
Yes.
podcasts, and
All
it's
of them.
like,
I've listened to all of them, I think.
yeah, I think you have. And they're great. So we recommend them if you're kind of in this space.
Yeah, and specifically with IOPKC, um, Blaze was at IOPKC, and he has a lot of history there. And so, what both of them bring is incredibly important, especially if you had any type of ties to IOPKC. Also, more recently, Morningstar, they've covered some of that as well. So, highly recommend. And then these next three are they work together. So Susan Tuma, Alyssa DeGraff, and Stephen Deere. They are Inquiry Inc. and they have different roles, but Stephen is a journalist. That's his career, and he's an excellent journalist. And he has spoken out. And he's actually Jack Deere's son, and if you know about the history of the charismatic renewal, Jack Deere was a key figure. So Stephen has been an incredible voice in this entire like what past year. And he has recently just teamed up with Susan and Alyssa. Susan and Alyssa are the forefront of the advocacy community, particularly with the victims and survivors of IPKC. So they are excellent, excellent, excellent. Cannot recommend them enough. They just have so much to offer as far as really navigating the pain, the trauma, and really, if you are a victim and a survivor, they are very safe people to, to have in your corner.
Yeah. I find it like just side note, like it's really interesting how through all these things that have been coming out in the past year, that a lot of the children of some of these leaders
Mm,
have come out and really spoken out about their parents, which is
right.
troubling and sad, but like very telling, right? Like
Yeah.
that, that's a very firsthand account with some of these family members
Yeah.
and children of some of these leaders coming out and kind of telling the story of their parents.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just wanted to make that side note.
For sure.
Um, I'll kind of go over the last few. Yeah, Nate Post. How do you say his last name?
I'm not sure.
Postaway. He's yeah, trauma survivor advocate. He's got a huge Instagram and Twitter
And
following.
Twitter.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's every quote he puts is just like
It's good
bullseye.
stuff.
Check him out. Bessel van der Kolk, he is the leading trauma expert in the world. He has a book called The Body Keeps the Score. If you want to understand why am I stuck? Why can't I move forward after spiritual abuse? And you are not like versed in what trauma is, I highly, highly recommend his book. It is excellent. Um, cutting edge, trauma, everything about trauma, really. And then Stephen Hassan, he is the cult expert and he has taught us a lot, just little clips that we've heard and
Yep.
things. He has the BITE model,
Yeah.
which is what? Behavior, information,
Information.
thinking, and emotion, I
I think
believe.
so. That sounds right.
So we'll talk about that, I guess, another episode. So
Right.
he's a cult. Chuck DeGroat, he wrote a book, Narcissism in the Church. He's a
Or wasn't
therapist.
it Narcissism Comes to Church?
Narcissism Comes to Church. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, yeah. I knew what you meant.
And then just two more. Andi Kobler, she is another trauma therapist and Christian, a huge mental health advocate. She's got great stuff on nervous system regulation and just healing. Beautiful perspective. Can't recommend her enough. And then Jeff Van Vonderen, he wrote the book that really
Yeah.
opened my eyes when I didn't know what we had experienced with spiritual abuse. And his
Yeah.
book is called The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse. Keyword subtle.
Yeah. He's probably the first
Yeah.
person in the church world to ever.
Yeah.
I think he may have even coined. It's either him or Ken Blue
Yeah.
coined the term
Yeah.
spiritual abuse. Actually,
I think that book was like in the 90s or early 2000s.
it's been around.
Yeah.
I read it in 2007 when I came back from
Okay.
Africa.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. Like it was like somebody pulled the curtain back.
Yes. So highly recommend. These are just some resources. I'm sure we'll have more along the way. But if you're just like coming
Yeah.
across us, you're new to this, or you're even in the middle and you need more resources, please check
Yeah.
out some of these people.
And then,
Because
there's one more I thought
Oh,
of,
yeah.
Wade Mullen, and I haven't read his book. I've just seen excerpts, which have been incredibly good. Something's not right. I think it's
I
just,
love that phrase because if there was one phrase
yeah,
that I could describe the spiritual abuse experience,
yeah,
is something's not right. Like when
yeah,
you're in the midst of it and you have all these good things happening and then all these like really weird not good things, like to me that phrase is like the essence of like something's not right here.
yeah. You can't quite put your finger on it, maybe, but it's definitely there for
Yeah.
sure. So,
So,
all right. Well, should we wrap? I think that's a
yeah.
wrap. That's our first episode.
Yeah.
Grit in the Wild. So thanks so much all for joining us. Hopefully you found this helpful. Definitely, like I said, hit us up in the comments, email us, find us on socials,
Yeah.
and we're excited to continue this. So we'll
Yeah.
see what the next episode brings. But until next time, thanks for watching, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.